is now outdated. As of 2014, the United States is now the world's largest energy producer, bringing up more oil than Saudi Arabia and more natural gas than Russia. What will U.S. shale output look like in the future? Details are murky. There are many shifting variables. There is no such thing as average when considering an industry that operates in wildly varied geologies and regulatory environments, and any estimate provided now likely will be overwhelmed in the time it takes this manuscript to make it into print. But caveats aside, the learning curve is still extraordinarily steep, with huge gains being made at nearly every stage of the process. Deeper wells, longer horizontal shafts, more controlled and therefore more effective fracking, better fluids, more detailed imaging, more experience using recycled and subsurface water all add up to better reach, lower costs, and higher recovery rates. From 2012 to 2013 alone, half as many rigs were able to generate the same output. Overall break-even prices for natural gas production have probably dropped from about $7 per thousand cubic feet in 2011 to under $5 in 2014. Similarly, the break-even price for shale oil production has dropped from over $100 per barrel a decade ago to $85 in 2011 to probably something closer to $70 in 2014, with many basins already nudging toward $50. It is now a fairly conservative estimate to say that North America will be fully energy independent by 2020. We are not at the dawn of the shale era. We are already in the shale era. Yet Americans still do not trust the industry. In a September 2013 survey, Pew Research found that 49% of Americans oppose increased use of shale energy techniques. Specifically, Americans are concerned that fracking uses huge volumes of water, that fracked fluid is toxic at best and carcinogenic at worst, that the frack fluid leaks out of the well shafts and into the aquifers that supply drinking water. It is difficult to square the importance and growth of the shale industry with the circle of public concern. Luckily, for both, I expect that most of the public's distrust for the shale-related techs will evaporate within a few short years. There are 3 reasons for this. First, the use of surface water is quickly being phased out in fracking operations. Surface water is full of algae and bacteria. Such impurities must be removed to make the water suitable for fracking. One of the more expensive portions of fracking fluids is the various chemicals required to purify the water. Add in the cost of trucking millions of gallons of water around, high bulk cargo, high cost transport. And surface water use is as much an economic issue for the shale industry as it is a quality of life issue for local communities. Luckily, subsurface drilling has discovered layers of mildly saline brackish water deep underground in almost all regions. Such layers are typically in excess of 2,000 feet below the surface. Also, note that brackish groundwater is not interchangeable with seawater. The many organisms that live in seawater make it unsuitable for fracking without extensive filtration. Energy firms have discovered that this lifeless, non-potable water provides a better medium for frack fluids. And because a wellbore at the drilling site can access this brackish water and the frack additives can be mixed with it on site, all those trucks needed to bring millions of gallons of water per well are suddenly not needed. Just as there is no average for well depth, there is no average for water requirements. Various geological and technological factors, porosity, clays, chalks, number of fracks, depth of wellbore, and more, can make wells need anywhere from 2 million to 12 million gallons of water. Liquid transport trucks normally carry 5,500 to 11,600 gallons of liquid, so being able to mix the frack fluid on site could potentially eliminate 90 to 180 truck trips per well. By 2016, large-scale surface water use will continue only in those few areas that do not have a brackish water layer. Second, most aquifers that supply drinking water are within 200 feet of the surface, and nearly all are within 600 feet. At present, the deepest water source for an American city is 1,700 feet for Rapid City, South Dakota. Some 90% of fracks occur at over a mile of depth, with only a handful completed at less than 4,000 feet. The longest frack cracks ever completed are but 600 feet long, with the vast majority being no longer than 200 feet. With recent advances, most fracks are often as short as 40 feet. This improved concentration isn't just a safety issue. The more concentrated the frack effort, the more impact it has on a very specific zone of high petroleum concentration rock, rather than a less controlled frack effort that extends beyond the densest concentrations of petroleum. This puts a minimum of a half mile of solid rock, remember that by definition shale formations are impermeable, between the frack cracks and the water supply. It adds up to a simple fact. There has never been a case of fracking fluid subsoil contamination of drinking water. But don't believe me. Believe the EPA under the Obama administration. Out of the roughly 1.2 million that have been fracked in the United States since the Truman administration, The EPA has yet to issue a single citation to any firm anywhere in the country for subsoil contamination due to frac fluid. The EPA has been working on an overarching report on the status and safety of the shale industry for several years. Its issuance has been delayed several times, ostensibly for reasons of completeness. Odds are heavy that when it is finally released, the EPA, and by extension President Obama, will place a stamp of approval on the shale industry, which will damage the administration's standing with the environmental community. What citations the EPA have issued fall into two categories. The first, surface water contamination, makes up over 90% of the citations. It is largely an issue of drillers discharging recovered frac fluid into surface streams. Such practices were actually legal in many states at the beginning of the shale era. The second is various forms of methane, another term for natural gas, leakage, whether that occurs in the well shaft, the pad, or the transport system. More on that later. Methane leakage has been a regulatory and environmental concern for as long as there has been a natural gas industry. The biggest new challenge such leakage presents is that there are so many more wells in a shale field than in a conventional field that operators and regulators need to be scrupulous about well completion. Aside from that, there is nothing that makes leakage from shale wells technologically different from any other well. The third reason shale energy is going to become more publicly acceptable is that despite the public firestorm, frac fluid isn't all that dangerous and is edging toward becoming completely non-toxic. While there is considerable variation in ingredient proportions, the ingredients themselves are well known. All are approximately 90% water, 9.5% sand. For the remainder, the dominant ingredients are borates, a key component in laundry detergent, N-dimethylformamide, plastics, ethylene glycol, antifreeze, guar gum, ice cream, and isopropanol, glass cleaner. While it would be best to not drink this stuff, there is nothing in the components that isn't already cleared for presence in the average kitchen. Regardless, the industry has noted the public outcry and has been steadily removing all toxicity from the chemical mix. In 2011, Halliburton introduced a new frac fluid made entirely of components from the food industry, which Democratic Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper made famous by taking a swig. He's fine, by the way. Other chemicals firms have followed suit, and disclosure of the various fluids components is starting to be shared more readily in an effort to diffuse the issue. The price difference is on average only 5 to 10%. Once it is clear that surface water use has plummeted, that the Obama administration has signed off on the industry as a whole, and that the frac fluid itself goes reasonably well with tomatoes and mozzarella, the controversy surrounding shale will simmer down. In a few short years, opposition will be limited to two groups: environmentalists who are opposed to any petroleum developments on principle, and local groups who don't perceive any personal benefits. This is not an